The story takes place in modern-day China, introducing us to Nuan Nuan, a young comic artist who dreams of working in mobile game design, although she has terrible luck when it comes to achieving her goals. On the other hand, we meet the young CEO of CM Tech, who suffers from a severe and rare allergy to physical contact with women, a result of childhood trauma related to his mother's death. Returning to Nuan, she is rushing on her bike to attend an interview, but ends up falling. While on the ground searching for her phone, a car drives through a puddle, splashing her by accident. As a result, the girl arrives late and soaking wet to the interview at CMG. There she encounters her best friend, who is a secretary and tries to console her because they refuse to interview her. Because of this, outside the building, Nuan confronts the CEO about the car accident, and in response, he grants her a new interview. However, Nuan's arguments for being hired do not convince anyone, especially since her drawings got wet on the way to the company. Afterward, the girl calls her parents to inform them that she is still unemployed and worried about running out of money. Later that evening, while having dinner at a restaurant, she meets a distressed guy who also had a bad experience at an interview. Before leaving, the man gives her a pair of glasses, claiming they will help her achieve her dreams. Suspicious. The next day, Nuan heads out wearing her new glasses, which allow her to see people's auras. The instructions for the glasses also say that through the auras she can find the love of her life. Additionally, if she touches a man with a golden aura, her luck will change for the better. Oh, I want one of those. After reading all this, she notices from afar the CEO arriving at his company, and coincidentally, he has a golden aura. Immediately, Nuan enters the building but ends up being kicked out by none other than Yi himself. However, minutes later, as he is leaving the company, Yi gets trapped in the sliding doors by Nuan, who, instead of taking advantage and touching him, scolds him for ruining her drawings with his car. After this rebuke, the young woman leaves, leaving behind a startled Yi trying to get as far away from her as possible. Soon after, Nuan receives a visit from her younger brother Min Yang, who asks to move in with her while he looks for a new job, as he has just been fired. Meanwhile, as Yi showers, he recalls the early days of his peculiar allergy as a child, shouting warnings for no woman to touch him. The next day, Nuan's landlord visits her unexpectedly. Thinking he is there to raise the rent, Nuan quickly tidies up the mess her brother made. Thanks to this, the landlord announces that he will lower the rent. Minutes later, she heads to the CMG building to wait for her friend Shin, who comes out scared and asks her to pretend to be a cleaning staff member for the company. Shin had forgotten to hire someone for the role, and if the office is found messy, she will be fired. With no other choice, Nuan agrees to do her friend the favor. While cleaning the office, she accidentally activates the vacuum cleaner's reverse function, causing it to blow out all the garbage it had collected. What a mess. On the other hand, an assistant there warns Shin that only men are allowed in the CEO's office. Meanwhile, the protagonist barely manages to pick up all the garbage. When she hears that someone is approaching, she hides under the desk. At that moment, Nuan gets the idea to use the opportunity to try to touch him, but she stops when Ming enters the room to sign a contract with Yi. After her brother leaves, Nuan slowly approaches the man to touch him, but she ends up tripping and falls on top of him. It turns out that the young woman barely touches him with her chin, but that is more than enough to trigger Yi's allergy. He suffers a panic attack and calls his personal assistant, Qiao Nan, to take him immediately to the hospital. Before fainting, the executive exclaims that Nuan cannot leave without explaining how she got there. Smells like someone's about to get fired. In the emergency room, a doctor abruptly stops Yi's examination, stating that his body is completely healthy and that he has no allergies. As Yi listens to the doctor's words, a flashback hits his mind. In the memory, Yi tells his father, Shen Ling, about the new direction of the company toward mobile games. Shen Ling rejects the idea, calling it terrible. The argument escalates when Yi accuses Ling Mei, his father's wife, of not respecting his late mother's memory. In response, Ling Mei throws a glass of hot water at him. Immediately, Shen Ling tries to dry Yi, but as soon as he touches him, Yi's allergy is triggered. Back in the present, the doctor explains to Yi that his condition exists only in his mind and recommends a trusted psychiatrist. That night, we see Nuan still trapped in the office. Out of boredom, she starts working on a drawing she cannot finish because Yi suddenly appears. Just as he was about to fire Shin, Nuon declares herself guilty of the incident, stating that she forced her friend to bring her into the company. This ends any chance Nuon had of working at CMG, but saves her friend's job. Shin, who also lives with her in the rented residence, is relieved. On the other hand, Qiao tries to convince his boss to give Nuon another chance, planting an idea in Yi's mind as he recalls the girl's enthusiasm for working in his company. The next day, Yi finds Nuon working at a flower shop, where he asks her to return the pen she took from his office. Nuon confesses that she accidentally broke it, though Yi already knew this, and simply used it as an excuse to offer her a job at CMG so she could work off the cost of the supposedly luxurious pen. Meanwhile, Shin gets a day off and returns home. Because of this, Ming hides to avoid being discovered, emulating the classic game of cat and mouse between the two. Meanwhile, at CMG, Yi explains all of Nuon's duties as the new cleaning staff for the building. Immediately, she starts her tasks in the CEO's office, but she does so reluctantly, thinking she would be hired as a comic artist. However, she still keeps her desire to touch Yi. Purely for the golden aura, of course. Don't get the wrong idea. During this time, Ming packs his things to leave his sister's house, but is intercepted by a medium hired by Shin, who, believing there were evil spirits in the home, sprays Ming's face with a repellent. Back to Nuon, she surprises Yi in an elevator, cornering him in an attempt to touch him. Unfortunately for both, the elevator doors open on another floor, where a group of employees witnesses the strange scene. Embarrassed, Nuon leaves without achieving her goal. On her way home, she finds her brother with an irritated face and unable to speak. Afterwards, she receives a call from her mother, who, worried about her single status, arranges a blind date for her. Meanwhile, Yi dines with his father, who demands that he check into a mental institution to cure his allergy to women, expressing concern that his son might never marry or have children. Meanwhile, Nuon heads to the location of her blind date, which she was forced to attend. Upon arriving at the building, she mistakenly enters the room where Yi had just met with his father. Against all odds, Yi approaches her and asks her to marry him, just like that. After this very unexpected proposal, he explains that he needs a fake girlfriend, and in exchange offers her a new contract with triple the salary. Nuon struggles to believe it all, thinking that someone like the executive would have plenty of women vying for his attention. However, she eventually accepts the offer. Who wouldn't? Upon returning home, Nuon encounters a guest, the receptionist from CMG, who confesses that she has been in love with Qiao since their university days, though he has never noticed her. Following this, the protagonist reveals Yi's proposal, which excites Shin and Fan, who encourage her to make him fall for her for real. The next day, Nuon receives an angry call from her mother for missing the blind dates. However, she quickly hangs up to answer another call from Yi, inviting her to his home to begin her new job as his fake girlfriend. While waiting for her, Yi receives a surprise visit from his aunt, who searches the house for his supposed girlfriend. Luckily, Nuon arrives just in time, prompting Yi to awkwardly hold her hand to introduce her to his aunt. The rest of the day is spent welcoming more curious relatives about his new relationship, forcing Yi to act affectionate toward Nuon. Later, during dinner with another aunt, despite the awkwardness of pretending to be in love, Nuon touches Yi's lips to clean off some food. Surprisingly, this genuine act does not trigger his allergy. Once the wave of visitors subsides, Yi makes it clear to Nuon that she must live with him, as her job requires her to be available 24/7. Despite the increased pay, Nuon hurriedly prepares to move in with her boss. Meanwhile, Ming returns to his sister's house to collect his luggage, but is intercepted by Shin, who mistakes him for an intruder. Nuon arrives to witness the scene and explains her brother's situation to Shin. In response, Ming assures her that he will leave the house and hands Shin his first payment from CMG as compensation for the inconvenience. Just as Ming is about to leave with his suitcases, Shin stops him, insisting he clean up the mess he left behind while living there. Elsewhere, Ling Mei informs her husband that Yi has a new girlfriend, leaving them both puzzled given his supposed aversion to women. The next day, Shin allows Ming to stay with them, but only on the condition that he becomes her servant. Meanwhile, Nuon meets Yi at the company, and he takes her to a beauty salon and then to a boutique to pick out a stunning dress for a prestigious anniversary dinner for the Gu Group, his father's conglomerate. Despite the gifts, Nuon refuses to accompany him, claiming she does not belong in high society. Oh, please, who wouldn't want to go? Later that evening, the dinner begins in an extravagant hall, where Fan is among the guests, showing the event to Shin via video call. Moments later, Yi arrives without a date and must confront his father, who once again belittles his mobile gaming company, accusing him of wasting money. However, Yi does not back down and declares that his company will grow bigger with time. The argument between father and son captures the attention of the attendees, prompting Ling Mei to try to diffuse the tension. Indignant at her interference, Yi respectfully but firmly states that she is not his mother and needs to stop meddling in his life. Ouch! Watching the situation unfold via the video call, Nuon decides to head to the dinner in her dazzling dress, stunning all the guests. She approaches Yi and Ling Mei, introducing herself as Yi's girlfriend. Later in the garden, Yi confides in Nuon that his parents divorced when he was 9 years old, and that same year, his mother died in an accident. As he says this, a flashback shows the moment. Ji's mother was driving when, suddenly a truck appeared on the road, causing her to lose control of the vehicle and crash. Tragically, Ji witnessed his mother's death from the back seat. Hearing this story, Nuon gives him a small bottle of milk, explaining that drinking it will make all his problems disappear. Later, when Ji takes her home, he thanks her for her support, gently placing his hand on her face, just as she had done when she wiped his tears at the dinner. Minutes later, before going to bed, Nuon realizes that she is earning her boss's trust and begins planning to ask him for a new position as an animation designer. Without realizing it, she accidentally sends this proposal via text to Ji, who immediately agrees. The next day, at CMG, Ji sets up Nuon's workspace inside his office, as his doctor recommended staying close to her to overcome his supposed allergy. He then attends a meeting with potential investors, confidently presenting why they should invest in mobile games. Seeing her boss in such a confident state, Xiao deduces that Nuon's presence has had a positive effect on him. Meanwhile, Ming rents a studio with his friend Lao Jian. However, as they are viewing the space, a man claiming to be the real owner shows up, accusing them of being scammed as he had not rented the studio to anyone. Fortunately, Shin witnesses the confrontation while walking by and steps in. Using her legal knowledge, she gets the man to confess and return their money in exchange for not reporting him to the police. Grateful to Shin, Ming thanks her, and they agree not to tell Nuon about the incident. Back at CMG, Shenlin refuses to sign the investment papers, claiming that his son is still sick due to his aversion to women. What a frustrating man. In any case, Nuon overhears this conversation and walks into the office, kissing Ji in front of his father. As soon as Shenlin leaves, Nuon pulls away from Ji, who collapses from the physical contact. She takes care of him, revealing the consequences of their first kiss. Later, Ji regains consciousness while his assistant is taking him to the hospital. Since his body feels fine and he's not feeling too bad, Ji asks Xiao to take him home instead. When they return to CMG, a concerned Nuon, thinking Ji was still in the car, apologizes for the kiss. In response, Xiao informs her that her boss is in his room recovering, handing her the key to visit him. Once in Ji's room, Nuon tries to wake him up, but in his semi-conscious state, he wraps his arms around her waist. Seconds later, Ji wakes up, immediately pulling away from Nuon, confused about how she entered his house. Minutes later, Nuon is in the kitchen preparing something for him, while Ji, still unsettled by her presence, finally approaches her and tells her about his unusual allergy. He explains that he can't get close to women because it feels like his airways close up, though Nuon seems to be the exception. However, Ji is still not used to having a female presence around him. That evening, Ming asks Shin for help finding a studio to develop his own games, explaining that he isn't convinced by CMG's project. Meanwhile, Nuon gives Ji some soup to help him recover. Suddenly, the house lights go out. Ji remarks that it's an electrical issue and hands her tools to fix the problem since he knows nothing about such matters. Annoyed, Nuon heads to the garden to try and repair the electrical box, though she can't reach it as it's located high on the wall. Unexpectedly, Ji picks Nuon up in his arms, declaring that he'll handle the problem. After Nuon leaves, Ji notices a drawing she had left on his desk days earlier and realizes her artistic talent. The next day at CMG, Ji asks Ming why he's been searching for studios. Ming replies that he wants to start his own company. And even though Ji offers to invest in Ming's new company, the young man politely declines, stating that he doesn't want to rely on anyone. Meanwhile, Nuon receives a flood of congratulatory messages. Confused, she calls Zine, who reveals that Nuon won first place in a mobile game project competition she had entered some time ago. As a result, she begins receiving several offers from various gaming companies to buy the rights to her project. Upon hearing this, Ji orders Xiao to handle the matter, as he doesn't believe he should bother himself with acquiring such a small project. However, he later convinces Nuon to sell her project to CMG, but only under specific conditions. She will be transferred to the art department, be named the project director, and will never have to clean his office again. With no other choice, Ji watches as Nuon moves her things out of his office, leaving him alone once more. Later in the city, Nuon runs into the project manager of a rival company, Jichuan. At first, Nuon is hesitant to sell her project, as it focuses on romance, which is far removed from the action games that CMG is known for. However, Shen explains that their company needs people like her, and asks her to take her time to think it over. When she returns to work, Nuon overhears Ji telling Xiao that she only won the competition because Jichuan wanted to humiliate CMG by buying an idea from one of their employees. Furious, Nuon confronts Ji, accusing him of always underestimating her and declaring that she will sell her project to Jichuan. That evening, Nuon calls her father to vent. He encourages her to follow her heart and ignore the criticism. The next day at CMG, Ji assigns Xiao the task of sabotaging Nuon's project with Jichuan at any cost. Though Xiao is not enthusiastic about the idea, he is obligated to comply. His first step is to find out where Nuon is, as CMG had given its employees 3 days off as a mini vacation. To do this, Xiao talks to Ming, who reveals that his sister won a lottery prize and used the money to treat herself, Jin, and Fan to a luxurious hotel stay in the city. In the next scene, the girls are settling into their hotel room, though Nuon appears downcast, still upset over her argument with Ji. Shortly afterward, Xiao video calls Fan, who pretends they are at a lively party, asking him not to contact her again during their vacation. Ignoring her request, Xiao heads to the hotel with Ming, where they spot the girls and realize they weren't at any party. That night, Ming and Xiao keep an eye on the girls from the hotel bar. Nuon, however, drinks too much and ends up calling Ji to insult him. What she doesn't realize is that Ji is standing right behind her, wanting to talk, but he tells her that it's not the right moment. Minutes later, the three girls leave the building, heavily intoxicated, prompting the boys to go after them. Xiao catches up with Fan, who begs him to fall in love with her. When he doesn't respond, she storms off, but he picks her up in his arms to help her. Meanwhile, Ming assists Xin, who sprained her ankle while stumbling around drunk. In this close moment, they end up sharing a kiss. At the same time, Ji finds Nuon and carries her on his back. As they walk, she pours her heart out, explaining how much effort she has put into her project. In response, Ji sincerely apologizes, admitting that her work is amazing and that he was wrong to belittle it. I'm melting with love. After a long walk, Ji arrives at Nuon's house and leaves her asleep in her room. Suddenly, she wakes up, still dizzy, and tries to kiss the executive, but he manages to move away just enough. Calm down, friend. Then, Ji receives a call from Dr. Chen, informing him that the results of his test clearly show that he is not allergic to Nuon. The only reason he fainted when they kissed was because he is in love with her. Later, at dawn, Xing visits Frank to tell him about her adventure with Ming, which she now regrets, not only because he is her best friend's brother, but also her roommate. Fan listens with interest, admitting that she also feels a bit envious because she didn't experience that with Chio. Meanwhile, Nuon starts her first day at her new position in the art department, just as she requested. There, Ji introduces her as a great artist in front of all the employees. Throughout the day, Nuon surprises her coworkers with her talent for drawing, earning a great reputation on her very first day. Meanwhile, at the reception, Sean is intercepted by Ming, who confronts her for ignoring him since the previous night. The woman admits it was a mistake and asks her not to tell anyone about it. This breaks Ming's heart. Just then, Noan appears, thinking her brother is bothering Zian. She grabs him by the ear and scolds him, but to her surprise, their mother, Mrs. Xiao, appears and takes both of them away. There in the cafeteria, Mrs. Xiao scolds both of them for disobeying her orders. She tells Noan to attend blind dates and orders Ming to quit his job and return home with her. Shortly after, Mrs. Xiao introduces Noan to the guy she had arranged for the date, who turns out to be none other than Shen. This encounter is witnessed by Ji from his car, believing that Noan is going to sell her project to the director. Back with Noan, she recognizes Shen as a childhood friend, but she goes silent when the young man asks for a second date. The rest of the day, Shen takes her to various places to eat, and even buys her a gift. But Ji always gets there first, hiding among the crowd. Eventually, Shen figures it out, and Ji makes it clear to him that he does not use Noan as a tool to harm CMG. Later, when Shen is with Noan again, she confesses that she doesn't want to continue with the date, as she knows he is only interested in her project. She then declares that she is happy in her current job. Shen, in turn, calls his boss, an unknown executive who claims that when she returns to the city, she will make Ji fall in love with her. She says this while looking at an album of photos of him taken by spies. Shortly after, Noan meets with Ji to offer him her project. After writing up a false contract, the executive corners Noan, confessing that he will give her everything she asks for, but before kissing her, she runs away, frightened. A few minutes later, Ji arranges an emergency meeting due to the leak of the source code of the game they were about to launch. In the next scene, it is revealed that Shen was behind the cyber attack from his company. Back at CMG, Noan offers to make modifications to the game to solve the problem. Fortunately, Noan, along with the rest of the employees, manages to replace the source code, making the game launch a total success. The next day, while they have breakfast together, Fan and Sing tell Noan that lately, Yi has been paying a lot of attention to her, trying to clarify that there is nothing between them. The protagonist makes the situation worse by revealing that, by accident, they kissed that morning. This leads to a flashback from a few hours earlier, where Noan meets Ji in the art department. There, he spontaneously sets up the atmosphere for a date, and they end up kissing. Later, when Noan visits her boss, Chio begins to suspect that she's in love with someone, especially when she forbade him from drinking the milk that Noan had given him. That night, both Noan and Ji recall their moments together. Even though they are separated by distance, their hearts seem to be connected. For a few seconds, Noan doubts whether he is truly in love with her and sends him a message. He responds warmly. The next day, the young woman tries to avoid him while walking through the company halls, embarrassed that others might find out that she is in love with her boss. Because of this, she hides inside a giant stuffed animal, but she doesn't manage to deceive him. He orders that the stuffed animal be brought to his office. Once there, he enjoys watching Noan trying to walk inside the plush toy since she couldn't see anything. Finally, he removes the mask, offering to have breakfast with her. During this time, he tells her that her project will be presented at a video game expo, and suggests that they start working on it as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Fan secretly enters Qiao's office, leaving a gift on his desk without him noticing before politely being thrown out under the excuse that he is too busy. Not willing to give up, Fan throws dozens of papers with the message, "I love you," under the door. "Friend, a little dignity, please." The next day, we see Noan beginning the development of her video game along with her friends and co-workers. One night, she falls asleep in the archive room while doing research. A few moments later, Ji appears, covering the girl with his coat and continuing her research. The next morning, she wakes up thinking she dreamt of Ji, but realizes that he was actually there when she finds her research nearly finished and organized. On the other hand, Chi deduces that his boss is falling for a girl after noticing several actions that give him away. However, Ji denies revealing who it is. Shortly after, while walking down the street, Noan runs into Shen, who invites her to dinner. At the restaurant, she tells him that her video game is about to be finished. Shen offers her a job again, but she rejects it once more. Before leaving, the executive drops a photo showing him from his university days with Roy. Shen's boss, who has just returned from abroad, is also in the picture. Upon discovering this, Noan can't help but feel a little jealous. Later, upon returning to the company, she overhears Qiao asking Ji if he is in love with Roy, but Ji refuses to answer and enters the elevator. This, of course, deeply saddens Noan, who can't stop crying despite her project about to be revealed. Seeing her in this state, Sin lifts her spirits enough for her to go on and present her video game at the conference. Meanwhile, at the company, Ji discovers that Noan left behind her research notebook. Because of this, Noan doesn't know how to answer the investors' questions, but fortunately, Sin appears in the room, dictating the details from her notebook through her communicator. That night, after the expo, Sin is intercepted by her furious ex, who even tries to hit her. However, Min appears to defend her, fighting the abuser off, thank goodness. Meanwhile, Fan is harassed by a thug, but Qiao manages to scare him off by pretending to be her boyfriend. Afterward, the man refuses to continue his harassment, but Fan manages to make him fall for her a little. Returning to Sin, she confesses to Min that she doesn't know how to love after her ex broke her heart into pieces. Meanwhile, Noan walks through a garden lit up by a large banner of her game. At that moment, Ji appears with a bouquet of flowers and a bracelet for Noan, confessing that meeting her was the greatest luck he has ever had. And with those words, they kiss, solidifying their love. The next day, the protagonists accidentally meet in the company's elevator. Noan refuses to fall for Ji's charms, wanting to maintain her professionalism. On the next floor, Qiao enters the elevator, telling Noan that she's late because her working hours were extended so she could focus on her video game. During her break, the young woman is approached by Line, who invites her to dinner to get to know her better. During this time, the woman asks for help in finding a way for Ji and her to reconcile, as their father-daughter relationship is far from ideal. While looking for Noan, Ji peeks through the restaurant window, seeing her talk to her stepmother. Furious, he interrupts the conversation, trying to forcefully take Noan with him. But when she complains about his mistreatment, he storms off angrily. After fruitlessly searching for her boss, the young woman returns to the company, feeling down. She tells Xiao about the encounter with her stepmother, and they both split up to continue searching. Eventually, Noan finds him by the lakeside, thanks to a suggestion from Qiao. There, the man opens up about his past. A flashback then shows a 9-year-old Ji watching his mother scream at his father for having an affair with Li, his best friend. After that, the lady forces him into her car, which ultimately leads to the tragic accident in which she dies. The truth is, Ji's father is a complete disgrace. Back in the present, after hearing that story, Noan ends up hugging Ji to try to comfort him. Later, he drops her off at home, but just as he is about to leave, she surprises him by hugging him and stealing a kiss. In another scene, Qiao opens the gift Fan had left in his office, finding a delicious lunch. The next day, Ji calls Noan to his office for an intimate moment, although she feels a little embarrassed since they're at work. Ignoring her discomfort, Ji starts kissing her, but suddenly a secretary enters the office, so Noan quickly hides under the desk. In the next scene, we see that Min now has his studio fully equipped with everything necessary to start working. Later that night, Noan visits him to play a mobile game together. In that moment, the executive tries to get closer to his girlfriend, but she feels a bit panicked about the intimacy. He then confesses that since they've been together, he hasn't had to take any more medication or see a psychiatrist, meaning that his allergy is disappearing. The next day, Min invites Noan and other friends to his new studio for a celebration. However, Ji doesn't want to attend, arguing that he still doesn't feel ready for people to find out about his relationship with his employee. But thanks to some encouraging words from Noan, Ji shows up at the event. As soon as Ming sees him, she refuses to greet the executive. Instead, she takes him with Qiao to another room to talk, where Ji launches a counterattack, saying he knows she had an affair with Shin. This changes Min's attitude, and he agrees to let her be with her sister, as long as she doesn't say anything about Shin. Later, when Ji and his friends manage to enter the room, they find the men unconscious from drinking too much. When they wake up, the three of them flee, so the girls have to look for them, just like they did that night at the hotel. Following this pattern, Shin finds Min and takes him to his house, where he confesses his love for her and says he hasn't been able to stop thinking about her. Meanwhile, on the street, Fan tries to help a dizzy Qiao, who mistakenly calls her his girlfriend. Thank goodness this causes the young man to lean in to try to kiss her, but he ends up pulling away, leaving her wanting more. Poor thing. However, when she falls asleep in his lap, he finally gives her the long-awaited kiss. Finally, in a nearby square, Noan crosses paths with Ji, who brings her chest closer and tells her to listen to his heart, indicating that it beats for her. The next day, at the company, Noan takes the magical glasses out of their box to thank them for guiding her to the right man, but she puts them back, assuring herself that now she would achieve her goals through her own merits. I'm the only one who had already forgotten about those glasses. Soon after, Noan receives the news that her game will immediately enter the development phase, so she is given an office in the company and a team to work on the project. Despite all the effort this requires, Noan remains distracted, thinking about Ji, who occasionally sends her love messages. Then, when Noan finally reunites with her boyfriend, Ji tries to maintain a professional demeanor at work, as he's still her boss. Nevertheless, he ends up lifting her with great affection. In that moment, they share a tender kiss, something that is seen from the street by Roy, who has just returned to the country, determined to confront the situation. The next day, as Sin rushes to work, Min notices that she applied her lipstick poorly and stops her to fix it. At first, it seems like a sweet gesture, but due to a slip-up, he ends up smudging one side of her face. Just as this happens, Noan enters the house, finding her brother behaving rather suspiciously as he tries to hide Sin. When Noan is successfully distracted and leaves, Jin emerges from her hiding spot, still upset with her roommate for what he did to her face. Minutes later, at CMG's office, Ji is flirting with Noan when Chow suddenly appears, nearly catching them in the act. Once alone with his boss, Chow informs him of an upcoming meeting among leaders of mobile gaming companies, which Ji must attend to stay informed about their rival Guan's plans. Meanwhile, Chow reluctantly attends a gathering at a restaurant, despite his embarrassment over having kissed Fan while drunk. There, he recognizes one of the waitresses as his mother, Mrs. Shen, who abandoned him when he was 6 years old. Mrs. Shen tries to talk to him, but Chow storms out, making it clear that he never wants to see her again. Witnessing this, Fan stays behind to console Mrs. Shen. At the same time, Ji arrives at the executive meeting. Shortly after, a reporter approaches him, triggering the allergy he thought he had overcome. Meanwhile, on a nearby street, a devastated Chow is driving, recalling his father's death and how Ji was the only one who supported him during that difficult time. Speaking of Ji, he finally escapes the reporters when Roy intervenes and dismisses them. Back at the company, Chow tells Fan to stop following him, making it very clear that he doesn't want a relationship with her. Despite this, Fan continues to insist that she can make him happy, to which he responds that the only thing that would make him happy is having a normal family that appreciates him. As Chow leaves the building, Noan finds Fan crying and comforts her. Meanwhile, in his office, Chow is also crying as he throws away the love notes Fan had left for him. On the other hand, Ji agrees to accompany Roy to a cafe, but makes it clear that he will only stay for a few minutes. Roy seizes the opportunity to propose an alliance between her company and CMG. However, Ji is not interested and heads for the exit. Roy tries to stop him by confessing her love for him, but she fails to achieve her goal. After that, Ji goes to Noan's house, telling her he missed her a lot during the day. However, Noan senses something strange in his behavior. Still, Ji continues, assuring her that he just wanted to see her and making her promise that nothing and no one will come between them. He then proposes that they move in together, saying it's time to take that step in their relationship. The next day, upon arriving at the company, Ji receives an alarming report that all their games are under cyber attack. He immediately calls a meeting with the supervisors, who inform him that the virus was planted from a computer within their own company. Chow reviews the security footage and discovers that Noan had used a computer the previous night after everyone had left. Noan is summoned to Ji's office, where she hands over the hard drive she connected to the computer. One of the supervisors analyzes it on a laptop and discovers that it contains the virus causing the attacks. Faced with this, the protagonist is utterly confused, denying any wrongdoing. However, another supervisor presents a flyer for a new game remarkably similar to Noan's project, claiming that she had been in communication with rival companies. After this avalanche of bad news, Ji orders everyone to leave the office, including his girlfriend. Despite this, Chow enters Ji's office to inform him that CMG has been sued for copyright infringement. as Noan's project has fallen under external control. Ji responds by accusing Roy of being behind it, stating that she is capable of buying out his company just to get to him. Furthermore, Ji warns Chow that they must protect Noan from this legal trouble, even though she appears to be implicated. Meanwhile, Mink receives an unexpected visit from agents claiming ownership of his studio and offering him a contract to work under their control. Shortly afterward, Zenlin arrives at her son's office to reprimand him after discovering the contract he gave Noan to pose as his girlfriend. Poor Ji. Everything is collapsing around him. Suddenly, Noan appears to stop the argument, but Zenlin remains furious, yelling that Ji is no longer his son and demanding that he leave the city immediately. Once Zenlin departs, Ji asks his girlfriend to keep a low profile while he tries to resolve all these issues. Later that evening, Ji meets Roy at a cafe, where she reveals that she has been tracking his every move for a long time. Even Ji's psychiatrist was in league with her. Naturally, Ji gets up to leave as soon as he hears this madness, but Roy shouts that all she wants is to be by his side, confessing that he broke her heart when he left university years ago without warning. At the same time, Noan is tricked by Shen into going to the same cafe, where she sees Roy embracing Ji. Heartbroken, Noan walks the streets in tears. When Ji intercepts her and tries to explain what happened, she refuses to believe a word he says, as Roy was able to touch him without triggering his allergy. What she doesn't know is that Ji has been suffering side effects from that hug. The encounter ends with Noan declaring their relationship over, while a devastated Ji begs her not to leave him. Shortly after, at CMG, Ji is forced to watch as agents from Guan seize all their games, stripping the company of its intellectual properties. The following day, CMG employees gradually leave the building with their belongings. Suddenly, Ji receives a call from Roy proposing a partnership to resolve his problems, but he once again rejects her offer. Moments later, Min bursts into his office, slapping him across the face and throwing a note from her sister at him. When Ji reads Noan's message, it says, "Meeting you was my luck," along with the bracelet she had gifted him. Heartbroken, Ji spends the rest of the day at Noan's former desk, where he finds her special glasses. Moved, Ji shows up the next day at the house where Noan grew up. Although she is not there, he has dinner with her father that evening, who talks about how wonderful and optimistic his daughter usually is. Afterward, Ji enters Noan's childhood bedroom, piecing together her past through her belongings. Meanwhile, Sin tends to a feverish Fan, who still hasn't recovered from her argument with Chow. Fan confesses that she plans to return to the United States with her mother, though she does so with a heavy heart. In the following scene, Ji returns to his now abandoned company, which has fallen into disrepair. He informs Chow that they will leave the company in the hands of the state rather than partner with Roy. The next day, Noan, now disguised as a bear, works at a cafe trying to attract customers, though she is terrible at it. It seems her streak of bad luck has returned. When she returns home, she finds Ji waiting for her, hoping to reconcile. However, she refuses to speak with him, entering her house and leaving him outside. The next morning, Ji persists in seeking Noan's forgiveness, apologizing for doubting her and asking for another chance in their relationship. However, Noan leaves, arguing that they cannot go back to the past. Later, when Noan arrives at the cafe for work, she discovers that Ji has been hired as a waiter. Meanwhile, at CMG, Chow receives Sim's help in managing the remaining paperwork before the company's dissolution. During their conversation, he asks about Funk, to which Xing replies that Funk has not yet left the country. Shortly after, Chow comes across one of the many notes Fanny had left him. Back at the cafe, Noan asks Ji to leave her alone, but he reminds her of his promise to always stay by her side. To lighten the mood, Ji dresses up as Pikachu, drawing far more customers than she does. That evening, a client accidentally touches Ji, triggering his allergy once again. As he begins to lose consciousness, Noan holds him in her arms and kisses him in an attempt to help him breathe. Elsewhere, Chow spies on his mother at her workplace, discovering that she had another child after him. Moments later, Fan confronts Chow, telling him he cannot keep holding a grudge against his mother. Hearing her words, Chow breaks down in tears, and Fan seizes the moment to kiss him, once again confessing her love. Despite this, Chow gives no clear response, leaving her in uncertainty. Chow, take note, therapy is essential. In another part of town, Min intercepts Sin, confessing that he is in love with her. Once again, she replies that she is not interested in younger men. However, Min refuses to give up and boldly steals a kiss. Back at the cafe, Ji regains consciousness and explains to Noan what had happened with Roy, pleading with her to give their relationship another chance. He assures her that they can overcome the challenges they are currently facing. While his heartfelt declarations move Noan slightly, she still has many doubts before considering giving him another chance. The next day, Min and Chow visit Noan at the cafe to share their recent romantic failures. During their conversation, they hear crying from outside. When they investigate, they find a baby abandoned in a stroller. None of the three knows how to calm the child, so Ji ends up carrying her. Chow finds a note from the baby's mother saying she will return to pick her up that night. When the cafe owner sees the baby, she recognizes her as the child of a woman who works at another shop. However, the owner refuses to take care of the baby, leaving the responsibility to the three young people. Meanwhile, Noan helps Fan pack for her trip, but also tries to convince her to stay and pursue her love for Chiao. Out of nowhere, Sin arrives at the cafe and learns about the baby. Meanwhile, at Ji's house, the group of friends tries to take care of the baby while Noan and her companions watch them via video call. When the baby shows signs of diarrhea, Chiao and Min flee, leaving Ji alone to handle the situation. Fortunately, Noan shows up to assist him and clean the baby. Moments later, with the atmosphere calmer, Ji mentions that he touched the baby and did not experience any allergic reaction. This leads them to conclude that his allergy is triggered only when touched by someone he does not trust. And suddenly, in a flashback of the accident involving Ji's mother, we see that Ling appeared to rescue young Ji. However, when she touched him with her blood-stained hands, it triggered the onset of his allergy. Later, while they were recovering in the hospital, Ling was taking care of Ji until Shen Ling arrived in a fit of rage, slapping her for daring to touch him. Back in the present, the protagonists return the baby to her mother, who arrives at the cafe after resolving some matters. Afterward, Ji takes Noan to his mother's grave, as it is the anniversary of her death. There they encounter Shen Ling and Ling. Alone with his father, Ji suggests they reconcile, revealing that he is in a genuine relationship with Noan. In response, Shen Ling explains that Ji's mother had misunderstood his relationship with Ling, who was merely an employee at the time. Following this, Ji approaches Ling, acknowledging her for the first time as family. He then kneels before his mother's grave and introduces Noan as his girlfriend, describing her in a truly beautiful manner. Meanwhile, at the airport, Fan is about to leave, but is stopped by Chiao, who throws numerous papers filled with love notes at her. He then asks her to be his girlfriend, to which she responds with an emotional hug. Elsewhere, Shin returns home to find it decorated by Min, who surprises her with a proposal to be a couple. Her first reaction is to say that Noan wouldn't approve. Min immediately calls Noan to confess his feelings for Shin. Hearing this, Jin finally admits that she is also in love with him. Back with Noan, she grows irritated by what she hears about her brother, but Ji distracts her by returning the bracelet she had given him long ago. Later at CMG, Ji gathers his friends and loyal employees to continue developing Noan's game, despite the legal threats. That night, Roy visits the company to speak with Ji, but Noan takes her aside for a private conversation. During this, Noan makes it clear that she cannot force Ji to fall in love with her, declaring that Ji belongs to her and nothing will separate them, not even Roy. The next day, after spending the night working, Noan announces that her game is finally complete. In the following scene, a conference is held where Ji reveals that the game, inspired by Noan's idea, will be launched that evening, and CMG will soon acquire the rights. Suddenly, Xiao enters the event, announcing to everyone that CMG has reclaimed its intellectual properties after proving that the attack on their servers was orchestrated by G1. Xiao then plays a video on the projector, showing an infiltrator at CMG swapping Noan's hard drive with another. The truth is revealed. Noan steps forward, proclaiming that her romantic game, Midyu, was registered in her university's archives years ago, confirming that Hethuan's game is a blatant copy. Meanwhile, at Ming's studio, he and Fan livestream the global launch of the game under CMG's name. Back at the conference, Ji presents more evidence against Roy, who refuses to confess. Suddenly, Shen Ling raises her voice, announcing her resignation, stating that the company had violated her principles and exposing Roy as a corrupt leader. This seals Roy's fate as she is escorted away by agents, but not before declaring to Ji that meeting him was the worst thing that ever happened to her. Days later, Noan is seen in a plaza wearing her special glasses. Distracted by the auras of passers-by, she almost falls but is saved by Ji, who apparently has no aura according to the glasses. Ji then reveals that he had examined the glasses and discovered they were just a virtual reality device. They share a warm embrace, confessing that meeting each other was the best thing to ever happen to them. As they look at the people in the plaza, they spot couples like Qiao and Fan and Min and Shin. And with that, it's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Check out more recaps you'll absolutely love right here.